العربية الإسلامية العالم بشكل عام وقف المجزرة هذه، مجزرة ضد الأطفال. هذا عمره 2 سنين، مش حرام هذه؟ ايش شايف بالدنيا لسه؟ أطفالنا بموتوا وهم لسه بالسن هذا، مش هذه جريمة العصر هذا. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
اجعلوا إذاعة الجزائر الدولية رفيقكم اليومي لنقل المعلومات والأخبار بدقة ومصداقية.
إذاعة الجزائر الدولية وسام أبو زيد فلسطين.
بث أحمد محمد لإذاعة الجزائر الدولية.
هيدي إذاعة الجزائر الدولية.
إذاعة الجزائر الدولية عادل دلال باريس.
محمد عبد الله إذاعة الجزائر الدولية بيروت.
راديو الجزائر انترناسيونال حبيب بن سفي بروكس.
باريس أمل حمداوي راديو الجزائر انترناسيونال.
عبد الرحمن حسيس برلين راديو الجزائر انترناسيونال.
إذاعة الجزائر الدولية صوتنا في العالم.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Prime Minister Nadir Arbawi is heading to Kampala, Uganda in his capacity as representative of the President of the Republic to take part in the summit of the non-aligned movement and the third summit of the group 77 plus China. And the war on Gaza has entered its 104th day, and the Israeli occupation attacks by air, land and sea continue in different parts of the Gaza Strip. And the member states of the non-aligned movement have approved during their preparatory ministerial meeting to the 19th summit in Uganda the proposal for the equality of full membership of the State of Palestine in the UN. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. Prime Minister Nadir Arbawi is heading to Kampala, Uganda in his capacity as a representative of the President of the Republic to take part in the summit of the non-aligned movement and the third summit of the group 77 plus China. The Prime Minister is accompanied by the Minister of Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has received in Algiers the Congolese Minister of Foreign Affairs. In a statement to the press after the meeting, the Congolese Minister of Foreign Affairs said that he had come bearing a message from the Congolese President Denis Sassou Nguesso to President Tebboune, whom he invited to take part in the summit of the heads of state of the member countries of the African Union High-Level Committee on Libya, scheduled to take place in Brazzaville. He added that the Libyan issue is complex. Algerians know best. Algeria is a central power in the region with one of the longest borders with that country. The President of the Republic has received the Italian ambassador to Algiers, who paid him a farewell visit to the end of his mission in Algeria. In a statement to the press at the end of his meeting with the President of the Republic, the Italian ambassador said that he had taken stock of the years he had spent in Algeria as ambassador, believing that this assessment was positive and that during this period relations had been strengthened. The Minister of Communication, Mohamed Lagab, is taking part in the third Arab Media Congress, which began on Tuesday in Tunis, Tunisia. This event, in which the Minister of Communication is taking part as guest of honor, is being organized by the Arab States Broadcasting Union under the motto Media in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Challenges and Opportunities. And the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army General Said Changriha, has paid a visit to the aircraft manufacturing establishment in Iran on the third day of his visit to the second military region. The Army General attended an exhaustive briefing by the Commander of the Air Force on its mission, workshops and infrastructure, in particular the production lines and repair workshops, as well as safety instructions.
قد حرصت كثيرا I have insisted on visiting this industrial unit and leader at the national level and its field to inspect in person on the work performance and to support and back the efforts of their users in doing their sensitive task in terms of the industry and formulation of aircraft to strengthen the readiness of our military forces to preserve their operational capacities in terms of facing up to different threats and to efficiently fight against any kind of emergency.
That was the statement of the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmad Attaf, has held bilateral meetings with several of his counterparts on the sidelines of the preparatory ministerial meeting of the 19th Summit of the Non-Aligned Movement in Kampala, Uganda. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has said from Kampala, Uganda, that the Palestinian cause needs more support from the non-aligned movement, believing that in view of its moral weight and consistent positions, this movement could increase diplomatic pressure to put an end to the Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip.
And among the main urgent and immediate issues today, our delegation looks forward to a strong and fair position from our next summit on the Palestinian cause, which is going through a phase that can be described as the most dangerous and critical in its history. This cause needs more support from the non-aligned movement, given the movement's moral and ethical weight and political effectiveness, and in accordance with its honorable constant position. The non-aligned movement can contribute to enhancing diplomatic pressure and putting an end to the Israeli aggression and destruction in Gaza Strip, and bringing the perpetrators to justice and speeding up the establishment of the independent and sovereign Palestinian state as a radical and final solution to the whole conflict.
He also praised the constant position of the non-aligned movement for its support in position to the Sahrawis' right to self-determination.
Regarding the colonization in Western Sahara in particular, we commend the constant position of the non-aligned movement for its honorable position in terms of supporting the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination in line with the related decision of the United Nations, whether taken by the Security Council or the General Assembly.
That was a statement of Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmad Attaf at the ministerial preparatory meeting for the 19th Summit of the Non-Aligned Movement. And the head of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, has warned of the future of the besieged Gaza Strip, ravaged by more than 100 days of the barbaric Zionist aggression. Philippe Lazzarini said on his return from his fourth visit to the Gaza Strip since the start of the Zionist aggression on 7 October that hundreds of thousands of people are now living in the streets in makeshift tents made of pieces of plastic or sleeping on the concrete. The United Nations estimated that 1.9 million of the 2.4 million inhabitants of the Gaza Strip have had to leave their homes. And an official from the World Health Organization has declared that Gaza's health system is quickly deteriorating and that it is in urgent need for more personnel, aid and access to the Palestinian enclave ravaged by devastating Zionist aggression. He pointed out that only 16 of Gaza's 36 hospitals were operating minimally or partially after more than 3 months of Zionist bombardment against the besieged Palestinian territory. And the war on Gaza has entered its 104th day, and the Zionist occupation attacks by air, land and sea continue on different parts of the war-torn Palestinian enclave. As the Israeli aggression on the besieged territory continues, the death toll continues to rise, with the number of civilians killed in the savage Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip since October 7 reaching 24,040 or 450. More than 61,500 Palestinians have been wounded and thousands others are reported missing. And in the occupied West Bank, Zionist occupation forces stormed today down the cities of Ramallah and Al-Mari camp. Sources said that confrontations broke out with the occupation forces in the camp, during which occupation soldiers attacked residents with live bullets, shooting and injuring 2 Palestinians. Yesterday, at least 7 Palestinians were killed in bombardments by the Zionist occupation army in the northern West Bank cities of Tulkarm and Nablus, reported Palestinian medical and security sources. More with Said Bouazi.
In a statement, the Palestinian Red Crescent said that a drone strike by the Zionist occupying army killed 4 people in the Tulkarm refugee camp. Palestinian security sources reported that heavy gunfire was heard and reconnaissance aircraft flew over the town of Tulkarm, adding that the Zionist occupation forces were also bulldozing roads and infrastructure in the camp. Zionist occupation forces also arrested 5 volunteering paramedics of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society in Tulkarm yesterday evening, according to local sources. Wafa correspondent said the Israeli occupation forces detained the volunteers from the Tulkarm camp while they were providing first aid to individuals with various health conditions and injuries during the ongoing Zionist raid on the camp. The Palestinian Red Crescent reported earlier on Wednesday that the Zionist occupying forces targeted a Palestinian vehicle in the town of Nablus in the northern West Bank, killing 3 Palestinians, including 2 brothers from the Balata refugee camp in Nablus. Palestinian presidential spokesman Nabil Abu Rudaina has deemed the Zionist entity's daily massacres and crimes against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank acts of global war whose objective is nothing other than the extermination of an entire people. Quoted by the Wafa news agency, Nabil Abu Rudaina said that the murders, the destruction of buildings and infrastructure, the land grabs, the looting of property and the seizure of Palestinian funds are all acts that confirm and reflect the Zionist entity's desire to wage a war of extermination of a people. Denouncing in this respect the silence of the international community, which according to him is becoming more and more a supporter of the Zionist occupier, the spokesman for the Palestinian presidency pointed out that Zionist crimes will not be long in bringing the whole region into a veritable conflagration.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours 42 minutes, Algiers time. The member states of the Non-Aligned Movement have approved during their preparatory ministerial meeting to the 19th summit in Uganda the proposal for the equality of full membership of the State of Palestine in the UN, a proposal on which the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, had insisted and for which he had pleaded during the Arab Summit held in November 2022 in Algiers. The President of the Republic reiterated this proposal in his speech at the general debate of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly in September 2023 in New York. Palestine's permanent representative to the Arab League, Ambassador Mohanad Akluk, has said that the State of Palestine has requested an extraordinary meeting of the Arab League at the level of permanent representatives to discuss the continuation of the Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people for more than 100 days. He said that the requested meeting is expected to highlight the Zionist escalation of crimes in the occupied West Bank, including its systematic destruction of the infrastructure of Palestinian refugee camps, daily incursions, the killing and wounding of hundreds of civilians, the demolition of homes, and the detention of thousands of Palestinians in inhuman conditions. The meeting will also discuss Zionist unprecedented Judaization policies in the city of Jerusalem. And Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has underlined that the international community must put words into action and to stop the genocide and aggression carried out by the Zionist occupation against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including Jerusalem. He called for imposing sanctions on settlements which are considered illegal under international law, urging sanctions to be imposed on the Zionist entity. More details in this report.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh made these comments during a meeting with Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong at the Premier's office in Ramallah in the presence of Foreign Minister Riyad Al-Maliki and the Australian representative to the Palestinian Authority, Edward Russell. During the meeting, Mohammed Shtayyeh underlined that the successive Zionist governments adopted a strategy of systematic destruction of the two-state solution and the undermining of any chances for the embodiment of the State of Palestine on the 1967 borders with Al-Quds as its capital, adding that the Zionist Prime Minister will not allow any political path to succeed. He stressed the need not only to rely on Egypt's Rafah crossing as the only passage of aid delivery, but also to reopen all crossings with the Strip to allow the delivery of relief and medical aid. He further stressed the need for the Zionist entity to allow aid to travel from the West Bank into the Gaza Strip, renewing the call to restore electricity and water to the Strip. The Prime Minister said that in addition to the aggression on Gaza, the Zionists are working on promoting settlement expansion in the West Bank, their daily incursions into Palestinian territories, killings, detentions, and the destruction of infrastructure, in addition to the escalated settler attacks carried out under army protection. He praised Australia's position in support of the two-state solution and its rejection of settlement activities, which he underlined are illegal under international law. He further commended the Australian people for their support of the Palestinian people.
And meanwhile, South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor has called on the Arab signatories of the Abraham Accords to withdraw from it due to continued barbaric aggression of the Israeli occupation forces in Gaza. The statement was made at the Commission meeting on Palestine held on the sidelines of the preparatory ministerial meeting of the 19th Summit of the Non-Aligned Movement. South Africa's diplomacy chief seized the opportunity to recall that during the period of racial discrimination in South Africa, no African state in its geographical area had recognized the apartheid government out of solidarity and unconditional support for the abolition of apartheid. And some 50 South African lawyers are preparing a procedure to bring the United States and Great Britain before civil courts for complicity with a Zionist entity in its genocidal aggression against the Gaza Strip. South African lawyer told the media that contacts with American and British lawyers were at an advanced stage, adding that the aim of this initiative was to prosecute the accomplices of the Zionist entity in civil courts. And to Yemen now, the American army has targeted for the fourth time in less than a week the Houthis on their territory in Yemen during the night from Wednesday to Thursday, ground strikes on 14 missiles belonging to the Houthis. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Algeria pledged to campaign for an African request that ensures a higher representation of the continent in the UN Security Council by granting it 5 instead of 3 non-permanent seats. Algeria pledges came as it began its 2-year mandate as non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Abdelatif Bouroubi, professor in political sciences and international relations, hailed to our colleague Lamia Hamoum the relations linking Algeria to African countries, describing them as brotherly and deep.
The
relations between Algeria and other African countries have a religious dimension which is very important, especially with Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal. The historic heritage that links Algeria to African states reflect the existing historic deep relations, in addition to Algeria's constant principle of Africa for Africans.
And still on the continent, the African Union has announced that it has appointed 3 prominent African personalities as members of the AU High-Level Panel on Sudan. Said Bouazi.
In a press statement, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki Mahamat, said he has appointed Mohamed Ibn Chambas, Speciosa Vandira Kazibwe, and Francisco Madera as members of the AU High-Level Panel on Sudan. Ibn Chambas is a Ghanaian diplomat with several decades of experience, particularly in the United Nations, while Vandira Kazibwe is a former vice president of Uganda. Madera is a Mozambican diplomat who has previously served in various national and AU roles. Moussa Faki Mahamat said the appointment, which takes effect immediately, is in line with the conclusion of the AU Peace and Security Council and in furtherance of the AU mandate and determination to entrench peace and stability on the continent. The members of the AU High-Level Panel will work with the Sudanese stakeholders, all civilian forces, military belligerents, and regional and global actors including IGAD, the UN, the League of Arab States, to ensure an all-inclusive process towards the swift restoration of peace, constitutional order, and stability in Sudan. Sudan has been witnessing deadly clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF since April 15, 2023. more than 12,000 people have been killed and over 7.4 million have been displaced inside and outside Sudan since the fighting broke out.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to a cultural program compiled and presented by Miriam Barshi.
Welcome to our special program, Inspiring Figures. Today's program is dedicated to the life, teachings and legacy of the esteemed Jalaluddin Rumi. Jalaluddin Rumi was one of the great spiritual masters and poetic geniuses of mankind, and the Mevlevi Sufi order was founded to follow his teachings. He was born in 1207 in Balkh in present-day Afghanistan to a family of learned theologians. Escaping the Mughal invasion, he and his family traveled extensively in Muslim lands, performed pilgrimage to Mecca, and visited Medina. The journey brought the family to Erzincan and then Qam Rahman, where Rumi studied for a short period in the Halabi school. In 1228, at the invitation of the Sultan of Seljuk, Alauddin Keykubat, they settled in Konya, Anatolia in present-day Turkey, then part of Seljuk Empire. Jalaluddin married and lived with his wife, Gevher Hatun, who bore him 2 children. He is called Rumi, meaning Anatolian, because of his life in that place. He also gained the title Mevlana, which means our master, through his life's work there. Rumi's tomb is in Konya, Turkey. When his father Bahauddin Veld passed away in 1231, Rumi succeeded him as a professor in religious sciences at the largest theological school in Konya. Only 24 years old, Rumi was already an accomplished scholar in religious and positive sciences. He died on the 17th of December 1273 in Konya, where he had spent most of his adult life and composed all his works, and where his tomb lies today. Although Rumi had already succeeded to his father's position as a teacher, when the great scholar and Sufi Burhanuddin al-Tirmidhi arrived in Konya, Rumi studied under him and devoted himself to his service for 9 years. This training was focused on divine love, worship, austerity and abstinence, piety, consciousness of God, humility and tolerance, which are the foundation of Sufism. Rumi spent his days mostly praying and serving people who came to visit the Sufi center, preparing food for them, collecting wood for cooking and heating, and cleaning the toilets and bathroom used by visitors. He thus learned the merit of serving people and knew what serving people is ultimately serving God. On Burhanuddin's advice, Rumi completed his scholarly education in Aleppo, mastering also the classical Islamic sciences, including jurisprudence, fiqh, commentary on the Quran, tafsir, tradition, hadith, and epistemology, usul. There was thus a number of significant figures in Rumi's spiritual development. Apart from his father and Burhanuddin, he made many great philosophers and scholars of the age, including the renowned Ibn Arabi in Aleppo and Damascus, and others in Konya under the patronage of the Seljuk court. He thus acquired both the inner and outer sciences within 16 years. The most famous and probably the most fruitful relationship in his development was with Shams Tabriz, who he met in Konya at the suggestion of Ruknuddin Zarqubi. Modern historians may argue about who influenced whom in their long association, but this is not profitable. What we know is that for a particular period of time, two skillful and acute spirits came together, and by sharing the divine bounties and gifts they received from their Lord, they reached peaks that most would not be able to reach easily on their own. To this day, the place where the two first met in Konya is known as Mark's El Bahrain, the meeting point of the two oceans. Through their spiritual cooperation, they enlightened those of their own age and have also influenced all the centuries which followed. Following the departures of Shams, Rumi continued to compose his works and to develop the principle that would be followed by the older form and named in his honor after his death. He started to live in seclusion and abstinence, practicing ascetics in series of 3 periods of 40 days. Eating a little, talking a little, and sleeping a little were essential components of this discipline. Here it is important to remember that while Rumi was informed by numerous sources of ideas on his journey, he seemed to leave many of his contemporaries behind. His love and compassion flowed like the waters of the world's oceans. So much so that while continuing to live physically among humans, he managed to become ever closer to God. He never elevated himself above others, but his writings, both during his life and after his entering into eternal life, provide a guiding star which reflects the light of the spiritual life of the Prophet of Islam. Thus he is among the few figures who have exerted great influence over large parts of history and large regions of the world. Rumi's poetry and prose writing have a spiritual content that is the universal language of the human soul. They speak of the spiritual journey of man's ascent through the mind and love to perfection. His works were recorded, collected and compiled during his lifetime and after his death by his son, his friends and his students, particularly his much-loved disciple Husamuddin Chelebi. He passed away in 1273. Muslims, Christians, Arabs, Persians, Turks and Romans honored him at his funeral, and men of faith followed his bier. That night was named Shebul Arus, the night of the union with the divine. Ever since, the Mevlevi dervishes have kept that date as a festival. Although Rumi was known and loved during his lifetime by the Christians in his immediate environment, the West only came to know him many centuries later, in part because the great German poet Goethe, one of the fathers of the hugely romantic movement, came to know and be influenced by some of the works of Rumi through the translations of the Austrian historian Joseph von Hammer. Even though most Islamic scholars would argue that von Hammer's translations were for the most part inadequate, nevertheless the power and beauty of Rumi's thought, mysticism and love shone through. By this route, Rumi has long been a strong, albeit indirect, influence on religious, cultural and even political life in Europe and the United States, and provides a real point of unity for East and West. The current truth and great potential of this cultural meeting is best proved by the fact that Rumi has been the best-selling poet in the United States for the last 13 years. Rumi's life and works show us that it is not faith, belief and religion which cause hatred, conflict and violence, but the sins of hatred and greed and other symptoms of the unrestrained ego. And he showed us how the true practice of religion, the purification of the heart, is the remedy for this. In our days, his life and works are a reminder to all that the clash of civilization is far from inevitable, and they show us how to derive hope, renewal and reconciliation rather than despair, fear and enmity from our differences. He invites us to call constantly to mind that we are all one. From God we come, and to God we will return. Thanks for joining us for this program focused on the renowned poet and spiritual master Jalaluddin Rumi. See you next week for another program.